and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. Allow me to thank the entire scientific and organizing committee for this valuable opportunity to meet and exchange ideas. The topic I'm presenting today lies at the intersection of three disciplines that are fundamental to my research: archaeology, anthropology, and paleopathology. This triangulation of approaches allows us to address the demon of infant mortality in ancient populations of Abruzzo from a multidisciplinary perspective, combining the analysis of archaeological context, the study of the anthropological characteristics of skeletal remains, and the investigation of pathological traces they preserve. Through this lens, we can reconstruct demographic data on infant mortality and contextualize it within the sociocultural and environment framework of pre-Roman communities in Abruzzo. This approach also sheds light on complex aspects such as living conditions, hygienic practices, and the impact of environmental resources on the individual survival. Let us begin by defining infant mortality. This demographic indicator in any society, ancient or modern, is of great importance as it reflects the sanitary, hygienic, and the socioeconomic conditions of a population. Infant mortality is shaped by a combination of factors that can be classified into two broad categories: structural factors and environment factors. Structural factors, which are intrinsic to the population itself, include biological, genetic, and sociocultural aspects. These encompass intrinsic vulnerabilities related to age, genetic predispositions, the demographic structures of the community, and cultural practices such as those associated with nutrition or neonatal care. On the other hand, environment factors represent external influences, including climate, geography, the quality of available environment resources, hygienic conditions, and the spread of infectious diseases. These external factors often play a decisive role in shaping mortality rates, as they directly impact a community's ability to cope with health risk and crisis. The interplay between these two types of factors creates a complex framework where internal and external elements intertwine to define the vulnerability of younger segments of the population. Studying this interaction is essential to understanding the living conditions of ancient communities and the dynamics that influence their survival. An additional classification of infant mortality distinguished, according to Di Tota and Capasso, 1994, between mortality in the first year of life, referred to as infant mortality proper, and mortality occurring from birth to 30 years of age, known as childhood mortality. This distinction is significant as the underlying causes of mortality differ substantially. In the first year of life, mortality is at its highest risk and is often associated with congenital diseases, malnutrition, or acute infections. Later, the incidence of diseases decreases in the second childhood phase, nearly disappearing with the onset of puberty. This improvement is likely due to factors such as the progressive development of the immune system, increased resistance to infections, or the body's adaptation to environment conditions. When addressing infant mortality in the field of archaeoanthropology, it is essential to highlight the challenges related to the availability and subsequent study of skeletal material. Several factors contribute to the difficulty in reconstructing the causes of infant death. For example, the relative rarity of children's bones. Diseases at play often progress rapidly, leading either to recovery or death. These diseases rarely leave skeletal traces. Even when diseases have a slower course with evident skeletal involvement, establishing a direct causal link between illness and death remains challenging. Additional limitation is using skeletal material for estimating infant mortality include the small sample size, which poses statistical challenges at limits representativeness compared to other populations, difficulties in estimating age at death, the underestimation of infant deaths due to the fragility and resulting difficulty in recovering remains during archaeological excavation, and a reduced burial dignity in some cases, especially, for example, for extremely premature deaths. This study, still preliminary in some aspects, was conducted on skeletal remains from archaeological excavations at three pre-Roman necropolis in present-day Abruzzo, a region of central Italy facing the Adriatic Sea. After the excavation, the analysis and preservation of these human remains were entrusted to our operational unit of anthropology at the University Museum in Chieti. The necropolises under study are those of Campovalano, Alfedena, and Sulmona Fonte d'Amore. They mark the structural differences, provide a detailed view of the demographic structure and living conditions of Italic populations in the region. Specifically, Campovalano, province of Teramo, a necropolis including remains of over 100 individuals, date between the 7th and 3rd centuries before Christ. This significant site allows for the analysis of a community spanning a long historical period. Alfedena, province of L'Aquila, this site yielded hundreds of skeletal remains dated between the 5th and 3rd centuries before Christ. The richly adorned graves suggest a well-off community. Sulmona Fonte d'Amore, in province of L'Aquila, in the end, this necropolis contains skeletal remains of 45 individuals dated archaeologically between the 4th and 2nd centuries before Christ. Nearly all these remains, which were excellently preserved, underwent sex-age at-death diagnostic analysis using classical anthropological methods based on secondary sexual characteristics of the skull and pelvis, cranial suture resorption, cartilage disappearance, and dental development. Age estimates, as commonly understood, are approximate, so the mortality tables that we'll examine relative to the skeletal populations under study were complete considering the decadal age at death ranges. Our finding reveals significant variability in infant mortality rates among the three sites. At Campovalano, infant mortality in the first decade of life was approximately 50%, representing an intermediate demographic condition relative to the other two populations. At Alfedena, the rate drops to about 7%, an exceptionally low value for the time. This demographic robustness aligns with archaeological interpretations suggesting Alfedena was a wealthy community, as evidenced by the abundance and value of grave goods. This wealth likely contributed to demographic advantages, such as a high life expectancy at birth, 42 years, and notable longevity, a residual life expectancy of 5 years for individuals in their 60s. In contrast, Sulmona Fonte d'Amore reflects a poor community with challenging socioeconomic conditions, here having labor activities like dominated, as suggested by the prevalence of degenerative chronic diseases like arthritis in young adults. This adverse condition resulted in demographic outcomes such as a low life expectancy at birth, 28 years, and an absence of survivors beyond their 30s. These are the mortality tables where we can read for the three populations what we have said about all of this data. A very interesting finding from the study is the rarity of inflammatory pathologies in these skeletal remains, as highlighted by Capasso research. This suggests that pre-Roman Abruzzo communities were adept at managing environment resources and likely adhered to effective hygienic practices. A comparison with the same Abruzzo population after Roman conquest and also in the subsequent eras, as we can see from the graph, reveals a marked decline in living conditions, including higher infant mortality rates. This deterioration likely stemmed from urban overcrowding, the introduction of new diseases, changes in social structures, and altered environment resource use. In conclusions, we can say that this study of infant mortality in ancient Abruzzo population provides us with a unique window into the past, offering insights into both demographic dynamics and the adaptive capabilities of these communities. The difference among the sites underscore how infant mortality was influenced by economic and social factors, as well as biological, cultural, and environmental elements. The recent decline in infant mortality rates reminds us that archaeology and anthropology are not merely tools to study the past, but also valuable instruments for reflecting on the challenges modern societies face today. Thank you for your attention.